Hi, welcome to the Footballers Football Show with myself, Tim McManus. Joining me today are Scott Allan and our special guest, Barry Smith. Barry, great to have you on. It's actually great to have two Dundee legends on the day.
Used to?
And Barry. No, it's great to have you on, Barry. Firstly, listen, I think it's been a big topic this week. Obviously, the change of manager up at Dundee. Tony Docherty sacked. Were you surprised at that decision?
Aye, I think everybody was quite surprised. Given, I think you don't know what the expectation that was set initially for this season, but when you look back at the season before, they make the top six, probably overachieved. And I don't think you should really be judged on overachieving if that's what they're setting the target at this year or this season. So that was a bit of a surprise. They're still in the league. I think it's the first time they've done that for a while, 2 years in a row being in the Premier League. So, you know, in that sense, you know, they've done their job. Should they be higher up the league? I think probably they would expect to be a wee bit higher. But they conceded too many goals. But by the same token, they're still in the league and they can still build on that for next season if they were given the chance.
Stunned at you shocked at that?
I was. I think at a club at Dundee you want that kind of continuity. I think obviously Barry touches on the season before, where for me they probably did overachieve. I think you then come into this season, you lose Luke McCowan, obviously captain, a player who was a real focal point of the Dundee team. I think looking at them in terms of performance, they always looked like they were going to score goals, and I think it was plain to see, yes, they were conceding goals, but for me that would have been an easy solve come this summer. Yes, they were scoring goals, get hold of Simon Murray, obviously Lyle Cameron obviously moving on as well, but players that he would have known, Tony Docherty, experienced number two, now an experienced manager, he would have known what he needed to build this team going into next season. So for me it was a huge surprise.
Yeah, I think that when you go in and do as well as Tony done in the first season, you know, a club getting promoted, and we've all played with Dundee, but for me they've been a bit of a yo-yo club over the last 15-20 years. You know, I played with them in the Premier League, the Championship, then they had a few seasons in the Championship, in fact more than a few seasons in the Championship. Then they got back up, they kind of went back down kind of straight away, and Barry's right, you know, the first time they've actually stayed up in consecutive seasons. So, but I just think when you finish top six the first season you go in, that bar, the supporters think to themselves, right, we should be top six at least this season, and I think that they got a wee bit of a bounce for coming up for the Championship. They were on a kind of winning mentality with coming up, and then this season I thought was always going to be much more difficult. So I was really surprised at it. I was shocked at it, to be honest. But listen, the Dundee owners, they pay the bills, they make the decisions, and it'll be interesting for me to see where they go next. We're just going to go into the ambition at Dundee, Barry. Do you think it's top six? Do you think that's the bar now, top six, or is it just staying up, or is it Europe? I mean, where do you think the owners have got the club now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's got to be a realism to it as well. You know, I don't know what the budgets are and what the budgets are at all the clubs in the SPL, but I'm guaranteeing it's not the same as Aberdeen, your Hibs, your Hearts. So to get into the top six is a massive achievement. Now, I don't think you should consider just saying we want to stay in the league, but ultimately that's, you set off with that target and then you look to get as high as you can from there. Again, as I say, the top six is a massive achievement if you get into it. So what Tony did in the first year, albeit Aberdeen and Hibs had poor seasons, but it's still a great achievement because you've still got to win your games, you've still got to get to that stage. And I don't think you should, as I said, I don't think you should be judged on that first season. The second season, no matter what league you're in, is always the most difficult. If you've been promoted, the second season is always the most difficult. And given that Aberdeen and Hibs did so well this year, probably shows that Dundee are where they should be at this present time. But if you have stability, as Scott says, if you have stability, then you're able to build on it. Changing a manager after 2 years for me makes it a wee bit more difficult because new manager comes in, does he play the same system, does he change the system? So you might be starting from block one again rather than actually building on what you've already got.
And when he did come in, when he did come up, we had to build, last year we had to build that squad from scratch basically. There was a lot of players out of contract, so he'd
a lot of loan players as well.
Yeah, he did. So he'd shown that he could go and get some good finds obviously during the window. So for me, a massive surprise I think when you look at the budgets. Obviously if you compare it to Aberdeen, Hibs and Hearts, nowhere near what Dundee can compare their players. So for me to make that decision basically off a second season not being as good as the first is harshly treated in my opinion.
Do you think that the fact that Stephen Robertson and St Mirren have made the top 6 3 years in a trot, do you think that's put pressure on other managers like say maybe a Dundee or a Kilmarnock with similar budgets? Do you think that's chairman are going, well, that guy's done it at St Mirren 3 years in a row, we should be doing it?
Yeah, probably chairman will look at what Stephen Robertson did. He's done an incredible job at St Mirren. You know, to get them into the top 6 3 years in a row is unbelievable. You know, because St Mirren isn't the biggest club. But there also has to be realism in, you know, how well Stephen's done, and also accept that you might have a worse year one year.
Yeah.
You know, but that doesn't mean that it means that you're going to lose your job as a manager. You know, I think you've got to look at the bigger picture. Dundee are still in the Premier League, which is paramount at the moment, and if they're moving into their new stadium and stuff like that, I can only see it getting better. You know, the new guy coming in, whoever gets the opportunity to come in, will have a good base to work from. You know, given the work that Tony done and Stuart, so it's a good base. But it's again a strange decision. The owners will know why they've done it. Again, we don't know. We're not privy to what the conversation was at the start of the season, and it might have been, listen, we need to be in top 6. Yeah.
You still stay up in Dundee. You obviously speak to a lot of Dundee supporters. What was the feeling amongst the supporters this season? I know it was a disappointing season. You maybe spoke to some after it. Was some of them maybe thinking it's the right decision? Some of them maybe thinking it was the wrong decision? You get a feeling up there more than we do down here?
Yeah, it's quite mixed. You know, I think people are wanting to see continuity because they see if you keep changing managers, it's not always a good thing. The grass isn't always greener. Others are looking at, you know, as I say, the amount of goals that were conceded can be fixed. But you can't continue like that either. The good point was they kept scoring goals. You know, Simon had for the age, I think Simon's 32, 33, I think. Unbelievable season. You know, and his goals pretty much kept, you know, them where they were. I think it's the fans up there just want success, but the majority are realistic as well. You know, the top 6 is a great season. Getting into Europe's a dream. As long as you're not getting relegated, folk are generally happy. You know, I just think that if you're given the time to build on success, then you will get better year on year.
I think possibly Dundee United doing well this season as well. I think it's maybe similar to Hibs and Hearts. You know, if Hibs are having a really good season and Hearts are having a crap season, it puts the pressure on the Hearts manager. I think it's maybe a wee bit similar this season with Dundee United having a fantastic season. Dundee struggling a wee bit. Dundee, their next manager, there's rumours Sean Maloney's the bookie's favourite. Scott Brown's been mentioned. What direction? Tony Docherty was a rookie in terms of management. He wasn't a rookie in terms of coaching. But in terms of what do you think Dundee should be looking for next in a manager? Experience or a younger coach?
Well, I think they'll look at Tony Docherty in terms of experience. Obviously, been around the game for such a long time. I think they'll not massive experience in terms of being the manager, but being around someone like Derek McManus and coaching at different various clubs, a club with pressure on it like they had at Aberdeen. I think they'll maybe be looking for the modern look, as you would say. So a Sean Maloney might fit that bill. Maybe a different style of play to what Tony Docherty's team has played. They're obviously looking to build around a Simon Murray. Obviously, there's going to be no Wild Cameron. McCowan went last season, so they'll be looking to see if they can bring someone through the youth system potentially, or obviously look to have contacts from other clubs to get players in, because it seems to me like they've got someone in mind to make that decision on Tony Docherty.
Do you think that as well, Barry? More experienced manager, or do you think maybe a Sean Maloney or a Scott Brown, who are high up in the betting at the minute? I
think experience is, obviously is better, it comes good. There are a lot of good young managers out there. I think experience is, but there's different ways of having experience. Like Tony had great experience as being an assistant manager. He stepped up as a manager. And I'll throw a name out there, Matt Fotheringham, who has coached at the highest level. You don't get to coach in the Bundesliga. With Felix Magath, he doesn't allow you to coach if you're no good. And it's just a sort of something different. But he's also a Dundee boy. That
He's Swansea just now.
He's back up the road. Yeah.
You both played with him at Dundee as well.
Yeah.
Good footballer.
I played with Fozzie as well.
And he's very intense. but as I say, he's got good experience. I've looked at a couple of the Kitspire who I played with as well. He's worked with national teams. And he's actually not the type of, he's not the guy that goes and kicks the billboards. I know he did, but he's not that type of guy. You know, he just wants to win. And he was frustrated at no playing at Newcastle. But there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. You know, Sean again. I think he knows Gordon striking really well. That might have because I know Gordon's got the owner's ear. So that might help Sean's case.
And the Scott Brown as well.
Yeah,
there's Gordon Strachan as well. Yeah, so listen, it'd be interesting. Mark Follingham was one that I hadn't thought of, but he's obviously very, very high rated in the coaching circles. Went down to Huddersfield, had a short period in the Dundee boy. I so that's definitely a name that could be in the mix as well. We spoke about, you mentioned Simon Murray earlier, 33 years old, top goal scorer this season, fantastic season. Didn't get the Scotland call up for the friendlies. You surprised he never got the call up, or do you think at 33 it's maybe his time's passed, or time to give younger guys an opportunity?
I'm not so sure it's his age. Yeah. My own thing, Simon's was a neighbour. His parents were neighbours of us, so I know him really well. He's a great lad. Scored a load of goals this year. I think there's a big jump for playing in the SPL to going to play with Scotland, playing the national team. Everybody that watches Simon, as he's quite off the cuff, does Steve Clarke want somebody that's more, going to play in a structure, and ultimately you want your striker to score goals, and he's definitely done that this year. I just don't know whether that step may have been too big to get into the national team, but you never know unless you try it.
Kieran Bowie only started 5 games for Hibs this year.
Are you surprised that Kieran Bowie's in before Simon Murray?
No, I would swing. I love Simon Murray. He's a player I'd love to play him. I think he's one who always plays on the shoulder, but I feel Kieran Bowie obviously come through the 21 setup. I think the natural progression would be into the first team. I think it's a position obviously we've all seen Scotland that we've been crying out for. Kieran Bowie started 5 games, but when I've seen him come on, I think he's had a real, I think he looks excellent. The kind of profile he's player might be something that we could build and use in the next couple of campaigns. So as much as he's only started 5 games, I think that he will be good enough and coming soon. What about you? I think it's early. James Wilson's in that squad.
Yeah, I think the boy. I think you've never had a better opportunity as a young Scottish striker than you have now. I mean, I look back, even when I was playing, even before that, there was serious competition for places. Now, I think if you're a young boy, a James Wilson, a Kieran Bowie, I think yourself, just get in the team at Hearts or Hibs, get a few goals. James Wilson done it, and he's in. He got capped. So Lyndon Dykes, I think, has been injured. I think he's maybe come to the end. Lon Shankland as well is getting older.
Kieran Bowie's
Shea Adams, but I think the likes of those guys have got a great opportunity. I think they will get game time in those games, because I think Steve Clarke's desperate. He's desperate for something. He's desperate for something new, and I think that it's quite refreshing to see those guys in the squad. That hasn't always happened in the past, and Steve Clarke's been criticised for being too loyal to players. But I look at it now and I think, well, perfect opportunity. Is it Finland and Liechtenstein or something like that? Perfect opportunity to just go and start them. Go and see how they got on. Don't bring them on for 5-10 minutes. Go and give them a game. We know what Shea Adams can do.
Yep.
And guys like that, and even McTominay behind the striker. Go and give the guys an opportunity and see if they can do it. So I think Simon will be disappointed. I think he can't do any more this season and score the goals he has. And I think when that squad came out, he'd be disappointed he's not in it. But it's just one of those things. I think he's maybe looking to the future, Steve Clarke, which is fair enough. Barry, we'll go on to your career. Started off at Celtic as a kid. How did that move come about? Were you at Celtic as a kid and then just signed for Celtic? Were you at other boys' clubs or different things?
No, I mean, I started off Paisley. Yeah. Started off with local boys' clubs. I signed back in the day the S form with Celtic. And then I stayed on at school, so I stayed on to 6 year, got my hires.
I was
no accepting that.
What school in Paisley was that?
So I stayed on at school, and then fortunately I'd been doing well with the 16s, and they used to play with Gifford North, the 18s. I played with Giffin up north as well, with your Billy Dolans and Brian O'Neill's, Big Jim Beattie.
On the ash pitch with the floodlights?
Aye, yeah.
I'll tell you that story. My dad took me there before I went full time with Dundee United. His pal, Guy Morgate, you know him? You ever heard of him? Guy Morgate was there for years, and before I went full time, he says, "I'm going to toughen you up." He says, "You're going to go and train with Giffin at North tonight, so you're not training." And I went and trained on the Red Ash, but it was floodlit with Giffin at North, and I was like 14 and 15. Sorry, the senior team.
Aye, that toughen you up, give you a few slaps.
I was a bit too sharp. I was a bit too sharp, so I didn't actually get knocked about. Aye, that's it though.
It's the thing they get. I mean, it was good. It was a good setup.
Really
very good. I think it's even better now. They've got AstroTurf pitches and that up there now.
Good grass pitches as well.
Thing with the
Red Ash.
I know. But it's because I stayed on at school, I just went straight full time. I didn't go and do the YTS. So I was quite lucky. I still did the jobs with the rest of the boys. There was only myself, wee Eddie, Brian McLaughlin, Stuart Gray, who sadly passed away recently. We were really the only three at that age group that went full time.
Who was the manager at Celtic at that point?
Well, it was Billy McNeil had just left. Tommy Craig was the interim manager. So it was him that signed me, and then Liam came in that summer. So I went straight in full time, trained with, like as I should, the reserves. It was a good reserve. It was a tough reserve team. A lot of good players in it. And after 6 months, I get my debut at Celtic. Played at Brockville, Old Brockville. Time to come on as a sub. I mean, I'd played right back and come on as a left back. So you're playing with Celtic, so you play anywhere. Made a few games up to the end of the season, and then I sort of signed up like a full pro contract after that. But 5 years down the line, Tommy Burns was the manager, and he calls in and says, we've got a chance of you going to Dundee. And at the time I didn't agree. I thought, I wanted to stay at Celtic. But in fairness to Tommy, he knew best. Great guy, and went to Dundee. Morton Vikhorst came the other way, and then I was at Dundee for 11 years. Unfortunately, played with a lot of good players up there.
Yeah, you're obviously in the Dundee Hall of Fame, over 400 appearances, testimonial. Dundee, I played with Dundee, but you also played with good players at Dundee. I've got some names written down here. I can't believe I'm saying these guys played with Dundee. First of all, Claudio Caniggia, Juan Sara, Caballero, who we both played with, Kitsbaya, Nemsadze. Who was the best at all those guys for you?
Nemsadze, without a shadow of a doubt. He was brilliant.
He was incredible.
Absolutely brilliant. He was actually, his English was quite broken, but he would try, to speak. Him and Kishnavili went to Rangers. The two of them come over. But Nemsadze was unbelievable in the park, and he tried to mix with the players. He and he's broken English. He would try and tell a joke, but by the time he told it, it wasn't funny. But he would try. But he said to us one time, he says, "I will make you a drink," and we kept saying, "What's he making?" About 2 months later, he appeared on the bus, and it was like straight alcohol, but he'd been brewing it himself. And so he's got on the bus and he's going, "How did they want to drive?" It was awful,
Full of him?
No, it should have been. But no, great guy, great player. Caniggia, just a gentleman. You've got to remember, I'm brought up in Paisley.
I mean, the day he obviously walked into the dressing room, obviously Benetti's, when he walked into the dressing room, Claudio Caniggia, Argentina legend, the boys must have been going, "What is going on here?"
On the minibus, didn't he training?
Aye, didn't care part of whatever it was.
Do you know what, he was brilliant. He didn't care. He actually really
humble
good
guy.
Yeah. I think after one of the Derby wins, he went to one of the local pubs. He was pouring pints on the bar. Not a care. He just wanted to play football. Just
good trainer.
Guy. When he did train, he's unbelievable physique for the amount of training he did. But when he trained, he was brilliant. I'm a defender and I'm playing against a guy that could wipe the floor with us, So, but yeah, a lot of good players there. That I'm grown up. I'm thinking that I'm going to be playing at Dundee now. Am I going to be playing with guys like that? You wouldn't imagine,
I remember him playing with Argentina in the game against Cameroon was the first game of the World Cup. Was it 1990? And the guy cemented them. And I remember I'd have been 1990. I'd have been 9, and I'm watching that game, and the first Cameroon boy came across, bang, and he kind of stumbled. The second guy came across and kind of hanged him, and the third guy, so his boot came off. And I thought it was his foot that came off. I remember shouting to my dad going, his foot's come off, Dad, his foot's come off. But it was his boot, and the boy got red carded. And I remember thinking, this guy's playing with Maradona in the 1986-1990 World Cup, and he's now playing with Dundee. So it must have been a great thrill for all you guys up there.
That was brilliant.
Guys like that.
Brilliant. Even Ravanelli. He appeared for a couple of months. What's happening? Scored a hat-trick and he's away with the ball. I think that was his last game, first and last. Because that was the year into administration. Yep. So
unsurprisingly.
I mean, I'm still the owner was Peter and Jimmy Miller. I don't know if you remember them. I'm still good friends with them. And they lived the dream. You know,
I don't think they would swap it. I think they went for it.
They lost a lot of money as well. I know a lot of people lost money, and we don't want to see local businesses losing money. We understand that, but they did lose money. They had a plan which Bosman killed, because basically they're going to bring in your Sara, Caballero, sell them on. It didn't quite work out because of Bosman, and you know, they lost a lot of money. Caballero would have went for. He was another very good player, and he would have went for good money. But he did his cruciate. He's the only guy I know that can be half a lap doing the warm up. He didn't care.
I played him. That was the first time you played him, and I was at. I don't know if you remember this guy. I actually spoke about the email last week. Hibs against Dundee. It was up at Dens Park, and they abandoned for snow.
Yeah.
I spoke about it last week, and we were winning 1-0, and it was going on, my God, 5 or 6, and the snow started to come down about half an hour, and I'm like, just keep snowing. And then I thought it'd get abandoned, and we thought we've just dodged a bullet, because they were very good at that point. You had Caniggia and Nemsadze and all these guys, Juan Sara, Caballero, and then went up midweek and you tanked us about 4-0, you know, and about 10-0. But that was usually because we were a good side at Hibs at that point. We had a decent side, and Dundee were different class, and I played with Fabian in the second spell. And you know, I wasn't great at running, but for fuck's sake, man, I couldn't run.
No, I didn't try.
Just didn't try a leg, man.
I think he was at 6 in the bleep test.
Aye, just 6.
But when the ball came out, he came alive.
Just 6, right? Literally just above a jog, and then he just went, Gaffer, I'm out. I'm like, you're kidding me on. But hadn't even started running yet. And I thought, brilliant, I'm good.
That's going to make you look brilliant. That's exactly how my brain went there as well.
But what a player when the boys came out, and how strong was he?
I was like an ox.
He was a bull.
Brilliant.
Sadly again passed away in the last year or two. But great guy as well. Kitspaya, you'd mentioned as well, Juan Sara, but great times at Dundee. Got to a cup final, and unfortunately lost that. Was Amaruso scored the winner near the end.
Aye.
I think you hit the post.
At the post.
I
don't know what I was doing that far up the bar.
Merzo spoke about it. I remember it. A 25-yarder.
Yeah,
when he said that to me last week, I went, no way, that was Barry.
I was surprised myself.
No.
Yeah. I mean, it was for a corner. I think it's come out and I've just hit it. I mean, I scored 5. To be honest, I scored 5 goals in 20 odd years. So
when I actually,
oh no. When I hit it, I'm probably at that point. I'm going, it's not going to end anyway. So, but no, that was a great achievement getting the cup final. I think the Duff Jim, great guy. A lot of time for Jim. He was a manager, and I think if there was ever a time to beat Rangers, it was that, because we knew they'd won the league the week before, and they'd been out all week, like celebrating. And if there was ever a chance we were going to win it, was that day. And I think it was actually Zurab lost Amaruso on a free kick, and Big Amaruso put it in the back of the net. But that's what we're good at.
That's how Big X signed him next season.
Aye.
So I mean, I've got your career high at Dundee.
But I mean, as a player, probably reaching the Scottish Cup final, getting promotion for getting into a promotion into the SPL was good as well under Jockey, because I think we coasted the season that year. That was a good team as well. Wee Grady and Eddie Anand.
Anderson,
Ando. let's say about him, the wee man will be cringing now before he goes around the stories of it. But again, very talented. But it was a big spider, Stevie McCormack. And again, a good team: Dave Rogers, Brian Irvine, Jim McInally. Very good team. And I think we won the league with about 4 games to go.
Big Stevie McCormack was some guy, wasn't he?
Brilliant.
I remember so I went and loaned to, I was at Hibs as a young kid, and I went and big guy Steve McCormack played there in England, a good career, didn't he? Big tall striker. And I went and loaned to East Fife and I was like 18 or something, and I got a phone call and it was him. Alright wee man, I'm picking you up, I'm taking you up to East Fife training and all that, I'll meet you at the Royal Infirmary down at the Royal, so I'm doing all that. And he comes out with this wee Fiat, man, it was honestly God, he's about 6'9", isn't he? He's all crunched over on this wee motor. Alright wee man, and you get. And I played with him that season. I've never done as much running in my fucking life. He did not move, man. He's like, wee man, just you run off me all day. Ball get played up to him, flicked on. Great big guy, Steve McCormack. That's first I mentioned him in my life. Career low.
I think you were involved with relegation. What made it worse was we went into the bottom 6, and
we were miles ahead, weren't we?
All we needed was 2 points for 5 games, and we got 1.
So we went into the bottom 6 of the SPL. In the game before we beat them, Fairmont 2-1. I think we were 10 points or something, 8 points or something off the bottom. We were 7th. We needed a win for the last 5 games, and we never won a game.
We drew.
We drew in the last day in the season. I think we drew 1 game.
Yeah.
Who stayed up?
Livingston. So Barry, I'll tell you the story because we played Livingston the last day of the season in the SPL. They were a point ahead of us. There was no playoff. We went to Livingston and won. We stayed up. They drew or won. We were done. So I remember going. It was the first time we stayed overnight and all that. It's a big game.
Is this at Almanville?
At Almanville.
On the grass.
On the grass. Yeah. And I remember Jim Duffy and the chairman and all that big boys at Brannan all coming in and talking about bonus money and all that's going to cost us, and I see a few boys shrinking into the seat, we're on a big bonus. So then we went to the game and support Dundee. Dundee had 3/4 of the stadium, mate, and there was, see the hill, big hill, there was about 1,000 fans up there, like it was ridiculous. We scored first, big Callum McDonald 1-0 up, they scored, which is a bit controversial because the boy Ashlan Cashflow or something scored 2, but they might be playing anyway. Remember the last 5 minutes, mate, we've got 5 up front, Stevie Lovell, John Sutton, myself, we need to win, and they're hanging on, and we're bombarding them into Dundee fans with just corners shot. And about 94th minute, I get the ball on the right hand side and I cut right across the box, and my left foot was horrendous, right, and I just thought, fuck it, I'm just going to eventually have a hit at it, and I've caught it quite well, and it's just trundled, and Big Roddy McKenzie just looked and it's hit the inside of the post. Rolled along a line.
Oh, you're kidding
the line, mate.
And nobody tapped in?
And he picked it up and just sat on it, and then the referee blew the full-time whistle. so there's a picture of me and the Dundee fans love it, they fucking pelt him out of it, because I'm sitting in the grass greeting like that, fucking like that, can't believe it. And people, the Dundee fans always say to me, that fucking guy bled for the jersey and all that, that's what I meant to him, and all I was thinking was, fucking bonus. So my secret's out now, Dundee fans. I wasn't fucking greeting for that. But I was thinking about the bonus, mates. That was us done.
That was us done.
And then I don't know if it went in administration again or something happened, or
I think Jim got left after 3 games the following season. Left after 3 games
and all that. But well, I lost cup finals, got relegated. That's without doubt, mate. That's the biggest sickening I've had in football.
10 points getting into the last 5 games.
We took 1 point.
Yeah.
Or something like we took 1 point.
What were other games like up until that? Games you should have won, or?
Dundee United were down there at the time, and there was a big game at Dennis Park, and I get sent off in the last minute for smashing Barry Robson. We get beat 2-1, and I missed the following game at Dunfermline, and they were in it, and they fucking pumped us 5-0.
Big Wilkie coming.
And then Inverness, I think the next, I think they maybe drew with them, but Livingston just went on a run. And they got above us, got into the last game, so we get relegated, and Dundee never get back in the Premier League for a long time after it. So that's what we're trying. I mean, talking about careers low, Barry, was that probably yours or up there with yours?
Yeah, it's never nice, losing, or getting relegated, but the manner that we get relegated,
it's a signal.
So it's not as if you were on a bad run the whole season, and it was just
No, we just at the end of the season we just couldn't get that result. So see, every time I come in and now when I see clubs and I saw they're 70 points, they're safe. You never fucking know if you're safe, because if you don't pick up anything like a Motherwell or Hearts, they know. Obviously they've picked up results, but if they didn't, and if St Johnstone started winning 2 or 3 games, that would soon shrink that gap. But it's obviously not happened this season. Management, Barry, you answered an SOS for Dundee. Chisholm and Dodds left. Again, tough times at Dundee. Administration, you went in, took over as a manager. As soon as you go in the door, 25-point deduction, puts you bottom of the league, really behind the 8 ball. I was at Falkirk that season, played against your teams a few times. You absolutely revitalised that whole club. You know, the whole club was behind you as a legendary player. 23 games unbeaten and kept the club up. That must be a proud achievement for you as a Dundee manager.
Oh, I mean, for the whole club, it was massive. I mean, at that time, 25 points, you're thinking that they've actually tried to, they've basically just said, right, we'll just relegate them. You feel fortunate when you get to that point, because guys have lost their jobs. Obviously, Gordon and Dodgy lost their jobs. And in fairness to them, they'd say to us, listen, if you get offered it, take it. You keep yourself in a job, which, I think that's brilliant saying that to us. But you're still going to do the job when it comes along. And
obviously you lost all your higher earners, all your probably better players.
But strangely, we managed to. The administrator, guy Brian Jackson, was really good, really switched on.
Grim Reaper.
And he'd basically been persuaded to keep some of the higher earners as assets. Your Griffiths, because we ended up selling them.
Was still there,
so we still had a good core of good senior players. Your Harkins, Griffiths, Big Rab Douglas, Craig McEwen. We had a good core of players. It was then my job just to basically galvanise them and galvanise the club, which I found easy because it meant a lot to me. The club meant a lot to us to actually, become the manager. So, from that point of view, I found that part easy. I always remember my first team talk saying, I'm getting over the first time as a manager in front of players, like at that level, and I'm on the tactics board and I'm going,
Are you nervous about that? Just as always
naturally be nervous though, whether you played for in the games or not, because the mindset's changed because you're now managing the boys.
Aye.
I would be too, no?
No, absolutely. I'd be shite myself.
Yeah, and the thing, I'm going, we get the ball, we want it here, there, and then I went, do you know what, you could hear the fans at this point. There was about 1,000 fans coming down to Stirling, and you could hear them. And I went, do you know what, forget tactics, just go and play. I says, see the fans across there, that's what it means. I says, and don't forget the boys that have lost their jobs, you're doing it for them and all. And for that day, I think we maybe drew, maybe 2 or 3 the first couple of games, we drew them, but there was a sense that they were a good group. They wanted to win, they wanted the club to stay up, and that 25 point probably spurred everybody on more than anything. It didn't deflate, it actually spurred them on more than anything else. Again, the thing with people say, when did you know you were going to say? It was actually a Christmas night out. The boys had their Christmas night out cancelled. They weren't allowed to, because a game had been called off. It'd been rearranged for their Christmas night out. So I went, listen boys, just organise something else, So I managed to, they managed to organise it. It was still before Christmas. And I'd been out with Big Rab Douglas in Edinburgh. They were going out in Edinburgh on the Sunday. But me and him were out on the Saturday night. So I'm waiting, and Rab says, right, I'm going to meet the boys. Are you coming? I was like, no. I says, let the boys have a night out. Because I was quite close to the other players as well. So I just went and I said, I'll have a pint before I get the train back up with Dundee. I'm sitting in, and Stephen O'Donnell appears. And he was my captain. And he went, you're not going to him? I was like, no, St Yusuf, your night out. No, you're coming out with the boys. So he dragged us back, and I'm trying to explain this to my wife. Listen, which it's one of the ones. So we went to the tower. I don't know if it's still there. It's like a room about the size of, the studio, and it's karaoke. And thing we're all in there and everybody's having to sing, you know, and it's just boys, you know, but it's a laugh, bit of banter. And then right at the very end, somebody went, right, Mum, we'll do the huddle, and you've got to say what it means to you. And without a word of a lie, there was guys in that huddle greeting because it meant something to them. It meant that much to make Dundee stay up. And see, after that, do you know what? I knew that after that day, I was like, we're staying up. Says this means the world to them. You know, they understood what it meant to the fans, and again, a terrific group to play with, and you know, there's a lot of good talent in there as well.
No, I remember I was at Falkirk at the time. I spoke about it briefly before, and amidst of that run, we were challenging. I think Dunfermline won the league that year. Martin Hardy, I think it was us, Wraith Rovers, Falkirk Wraith Rovers and Dunfermline were all going for the league title. You were obviously at the points deduction, and we went 2-0 up against you at Falkirk with 10-15 minutes to go, and I thought they're dead and buried. And it was they was on a good run at the minute, and then they get one back, the big support down for Dundee, and I thought, fuck, here we go. And then boy Ross Perry, the last it, and then he's drew two each. I'm coming away thinking, how the fuck did they get a draw out of that? But that's probably the team spirit you had. Donkey's played great that day. We probably should have won the game, but they dug out a draw, and it kept going to another week, and it was like every week you're thinking Dundee 1-0 down, that's it. Then one each, maybe 1-2-1. And it was just all season, that togetherness she's had was phenomenal. Was that a challenge for you guys, maybe not getting paid and all that and stuff like that, but the financial difficulties? Obviously administration, a lot of cost cutting, organising buses. Did the supporters get behind you and rattle down the money?
I think, you know, the supporters were incredible. You know, the amount of money they raised that year just to keep everything afloat. If we ever needed anything, you know, there was businesses wanting to help. You know, they understood, you know, like certain things that the club needed, and you know, bills had to be paid, so you know, basically the fans were coming up with it, and it just showed, you know, the spirit there is there between, you know, if you can get the fans together and the players together, it can be unbeatable, you know, and that's certainly what happened up there. The players, you know, the ones that took their wage cuts, they gave everything, you know, they were obviously happy that they'd kept their job, they'd lost a bit of money, but you know, they wanted to make sure that come the end of the season that Dundee were in the same division, you know, so strangely it wasn't that hard to, you know, get them going. They were just...
And you were pulling trialists at pubs, or is that a true story? You know, there was a guy, I think there was a guy, is it Robertson?
Craig Robertson.
Sorry about that, Barry.
It was just a loophole. The chief executive found it at the time. He was playing for Lockheed United. But we found out we could use, because he was amateur, we could use him for 3 games. So it's like me, like I'd known him because like from being up there I knew, and he was a good player. And he played against Wraith, and I told him before the game, listen, you're starting, and he was man of the match. It was brilliant, you know. And for him as a lifelong Dundee fan to pull on the shirt, it meant like the world to him. He still appears, you know, like at all the functions that are there, he always comes, you know, and it's brilliant because he's part of it. But actually we did the same with a guy, Jake Hyde. Remember Jake Hyde?
Jake Hyde, that's right, striker.
He's the only player that's been signed with Lockheed. He never played a game for Lockheed, but played 3 games for Dundee.
So he's worked a bit, isn't it?
Listen, at that stage where the SPFL had pretty much snookered us, we were like, well, we need to try find all the loopholes. I don't think they were too happy, but we had to put a team in the pitch. You know.
Neil McCann as well. I think Neil McCann come back and
he come back and scored. I can't remember who he scored against. Wraith. I was doing analysis of the game after. I'm looking at the photo, and he scores, and all the crowd pile on the pitch. All the players run over to the dairy, and they're all jumping on top of each other. And as I'm looking back at the very bottom, there's just this guy with jeans on. He's managed to get in the bottom of the celebration. Fans. But you know, that was the time. You never forget that. Never forget that.
No, listen, it was a phenomenal achievement, and great credit to you as a coach for achieving that at Dundee, keeping them in the division. Last job, you were in Canada at York United. Martin Nash got you over, Steve Nash's brother. How do you know him, Martin Nash?
Actually, I didn't know Nashi.
Right.
The chief executive, I think chief executive, he's called something different over there, but he was actually, his dad's a Dundee supporter.
Right.
This guy grew up in London, Angus McNabb his name is, and I'd actually, he called me up and says, "What are you doing in it?" I was like, "I'm not doing anything." And he says, "Listen, we've got a city." Martin was an assistant coach at one of the other teams. He says, "He's coming in as our head coach, would you come over and give him a hand?" And I said, "Well," I said, "let me speak to Martin first." I says, "He needs to be comfy with me." And with a call, and good guy, thought about the game. I thought, aye, why not? So I went over for a year and a half. It was brought to Canada.
Is that Toronto?
Toronto, aye. Beautiful place, a lot of travelling. I didn't realise you get across there, and the country's massive. It was like a 5-hour flight with a 3-hour time difference to one of the games, and you're rocking up. I don't know how the players did it. You know.
Still got a lot to offer as a coach. You're looking to get back in, maybe as a manager or number 2 or somewhere else, Barry?
Listen, from my point of view, I've got a lot of experience. There are a lot of good young coaches out there, and like myself, you get an opportunity as a young coach, you've got to take it. I always think that you do need a wee bit of experience to guide you through the hard times. And if it was as an assistant, I can definitely do that, because I've been through, a lot in my career. And as a manager, it's something I enjoyed doing. So you always wait for the next opportunity, whether it comes or no. You've just got to wait for it. But I know that I've got, as you say, a lot to offer, given the experience that I've got. And it doesn't have to be good experiences. You learn from the bad experiences. Folk forget that. That it's like about learning about yourself and learning about what works. I'm currently in helping Dundee's academy. I've always done that. I've always went back into the academy to give something back. Dundee's academy is actually going really well. Their 18s were in the BP final. The 16s and the 13s won the Cass Cup at the weekend there, so it's going strong, it's going in the right direction. You just need to have that pathway into the first team, which I'm sure will happen.
They have, haven't they? If you're looking at, obviously, with Mulligan, Lyle Cameron, that Dundee are the ones that have been, out of all the clubs in the SPL, giving boys a chance.
Yeah, because I remember when, I think you were there, Barry, when Alec Ray came in, and then Alan Kernahan came in. They did give a lot of younger guys, Big Kev McDonald came in, Scott Robertson came in, who's obviously still at Dundee. And it has been a wee while since they've had a wee lull between those guys who they settled on for a few quid, until the Lyle Camerons and guys like that who are moving on.
I think administration probably had a lot to do that, because they lost the academy at that stage.
Right.
So
you then sweep them all up.
Yeah, and hopefully it never happens, but like we would do the same. We would take all the players, So at this point in time, the academy's going really well. They've actually got their own school as well up there. And the group at 16s are the ones that have been in for the 4 years, and I can see a massive difference technically. And it's good to get back. I think it's good to get back into the academy, and you can try things. Like, no disrespect to the younger ones, but they don't know if it's going wrong or right. You're just telling them, and then you work out what works and what doesn't. And you also get to see the young ones coming through. That in a couple of years, 2 in that 16s team, that in a couple of years I would suggest that if they're not playing in Dundee's first team, they'll be somewhere else playing. Very good players. But you get to see all the young players that are coming through at all the different clubs. So then when you jump into, you get the next job, you've already got a start, because you know the young ones that are coming through.
No, brilliant, Barry. It's been great to have you in, and as I said, I hope you're back in somewhere, either as a manager or number 2 soon, because I think you've still got a lot to offer. Thanks, Scott, for coming today as well. Thanks for listening and watching, and please subscribe to the PLZ YouTube channel. Cheers.